Phil, just so great to have you on the show. But want to really start from kind of the genesis. You know, as an engineer, uh, I would say that switching and shifting from engineer to strategy consultant and coach is vastly kind of different. So, how did you get your start? What started you
Yeah.
in this field, coaching and development?
Do you know, that's a really great question, Stephen. I was lucky. I was a mechanical engineer in the 1990s, so it seems a long time ago now. And I joined the Rolls-Royce Graduate Development Program. And at the time, Rolls-Royce I mean, it's still a great business, competing with General Electric and Pratt and Whitney. But the thing about it, it had a great leadership development program. And I came out of an engineering degree and went into Rolls-Royce on their management development program and was lucky. I got in at the right time and they spent money on me. And part of that helped me look at where I wanted to go next. And I was a child of the time where it became MBAs were the thing that a lot of people went to do back in the beginning of 2000. And I realized I was too young to go on an MBA at that time. I was only 23, but it was something I had an aspiration to do. But my manager at the time allowed me to go on a day release program to do a diploma in management, which in the UK was the starting point of a management development program for an MBA. So I got into that program, did the diploma in management, and that led me into learning about management as opposed to engineering. And I suddenly realized that actually people were what made businesses tick, as well as the engineering. And I needed two skills. And the
Mm.
other bit for it as well, Rolls-Royce was really good about understanding that some people had a technical ability and wanted to go down a technical route, and other people had a good managerial ability. And you shouldn't stop either person going down those different routes, and you shouldn't limit their capacity to grow. So I went down a management route. And the next thing that happened for me that was really good, in 1996, Rolls-Royce decided it needed to re-engineer the business. And it was called business process re-engineering back in those days. And Rolls-Royce brought in a consultancy firm called A.T. Kearney. And as a 26-year-old graduate, I thought, this is my chance. And I got myself onto that program as the internal consultant and ended up working alongside some really seasoned consultants from the US and the UK. And I learned a lot of skills, still as Rolls-Royce, but that was the thing that started me on this journey into leadership development and coaching. Coaching back in the 90s wasn't something that most people talked about, but it was growing. And I think that's where I
Mhm.
discovered this word coaching. But it wasn't for another 10 years I got into real coaching, as I call it now.
Yeah, and I think that I think it was back in the '90s when John Whitmore really began to be popularized by his book on performance-based coaching and really helping managers really come to that revelation. So
Yeah.
my curiosity really leads me to this idea because for those of you who are joining our podcast, this is going to be a shared podcast between Ignium podcasting and Sparks by Ignium and Experience Leadership. So those who are joining from our side of the pond, who are listening to this podcast, um, you know, Ignium Consulting, you're sparking my curiosity
Yeah. Yeah. I love it.
by that title. So give us a little insight. Why Ignium Consulting?
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about that. I love the idea, and I've got my thoughts, but I want you to kind of share the seat you sit in.
Yeah, do you know? I love that question. And so this is my third business. So I left that Rolls-Royce journey back in 2005 and set out on the world as a consultant, and specifically around that word strategy. I went on and did my MBA 10 years later, did my MBA, and I fell in love with strategy because it was about predicting the future. And I'm a big picture person. I love seeing the macro picture of what's going on. And if anyone could see me now, I've got my arms out, moving around, saying, look, this is what I look at. And for me, I love this word strategy. And I set out to create an electronics business. I built a business called Bright Technology. And when I say built, I bought some product from China and tried to sell it in the UK. And if anyone wants that, 20 years later, I've still got a garage full of product because I didn't have the right strategy to sell it. So the business failed pretty quickly. Um, and for the last 15 years, I think I've been on a mission to look at how do I help businesses do better than I did with that product. And what I
Mm,
realized is that it's very easy to come up with ideas around a business. We can all have ideas. Ideas are everywhere. But putting a business in practice and making it come alive is key, and maintaining that momentum. Because actually, you and I have got great sparks. If we talk, Stephen, we can come up with lots of ideas. We spark ideas off of people. There's lots of stuff out there. And I think as you get into a business, sometimes those ideas don't come as well to each other. And Ignium was born out of the view that the thing that sustains business is passion. And what sustains passion is purpose. So when we created Ignium, Kerry and I came up with it and we said, actually, we want a business that really creates a passion for people around this word purpose. Because if you get your
Yes.
purpose right, as Jim Collins always says, get your core principle right, it will guide you on for the future. And
Mm.
Ignium is about sparking that and maintaining that spark to keep your momentum going. That's the key to it.
Now, for those of you that are entrepreneurs, and I know that we always recommend when we start working with a company, especially a company that's entrepreneurial led, that they read the book, The E-Myth, or something like that. And I believe it's an E-Myth Revisited. There's about 100 different emails books out there now, but I think it was E-Myth Revisited, where Sarah, his prototype client, that he's constantly interacting with, both in E-Myth Revisited and E-Myth uh, worldwide.
Yeah.
But E-Myth Mastery, excuse me. And so in E-Myth Mastery, he challenges her on this word purpose. And he goes as far as to say there is no purpose to purpose. If you get consumed with purpose, he almost says you're getting lost in the wrong thing. You don't discover, your purpose is discovered as a part of this larger framework. But people get too obsessed over the word purpose without truly understanding that whatever you do, kind of like what you said with ideas,
Yeah.
choose an idea, lock onto something. And I believe it was John Maxwell that really struck me with this, because they asked him, what's the most important quality that you would say that has contributed to your success? And he looked, and he looked around, and you think I'm just going to say something profound. He says, consistency.
Yeah. Yeah.
Whatever path you choose, and purpose, I believe, is what ignites a fire within us to say, this is what I am called or responsible to do. This is what based upon the gifts that I've been given, this is what I
Yeah.
owe humankind to deliver for them. And so it comes from this spark. But if we get obsessed in the journey of discovering purpose, we'll get lost rather than choosing and letting that discovery define something for us and move in that direction.
Yeah.
And I think that's where I would love to hear your thoughts on that, because I mean,
Yeah.
when I first read that from in E-Myth Mastery, where he says there's no purpose to purpose, I was discouraged, because purpose is central. What are you talking about?
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
what he was getting, I would love for you to get your thoughts on what he was getting at with that.
Yeah, and it's a really interesting point, because and that book, before we go on to that book was the first book my accountant in the UK gave me when I said to her, I want to set up a business. She said, before you do this, go and read this book. And I went away and read it, and still set up the business. And a few years later, I was lucky enough to meet Michael Gerber at an event, and I got him to sign that book, because to me that's a book that sits on my bookshelf now, and I think it guides a lot of things. And I love that thing around consistency, because you're right, you can go into business, and you see this a lot from your work as well, Stephen, in the sense of getting into a business is easy. It's maintaining it, and using Sarah as that example of that prototype business and of getting in there and doing it. It's very easy to say what we're going to do, but unless you stick to the knitting, as we say, and do the thing you're good at, actually it's very easy to get deviated from it. And I think even in your work in terms of leadership coaching and training, if you looked at some of these individuals, it's not that they're not clear on their ideas, it's because they just don't stick to what they're really good at in the first place. And sometimes purpose, I think, is it's the guiding North Star, it's the guiding light to where we're going in the future. But you have to understand why is it important. And you and I often talk about books, Stephen, and the one book I always come back to is Good to Great by Jim Collins. And the other one, more recently, is just coming back to Simon Sinek's book and saying, okay, if you start with why and understand that and be really clear on it, it's the thing that motivates you. It gets you out of bed in the morning. It drives your passion. It keeps you moving. So I think consistency is key. And there's lots of quotes around this. And interesting, a lot of the quotes I quote to my clients come from the 1960s. And I quote two people, Martin Luther King and JFK. And I say both of those people, at the end of the day, I have a dream that one day, or by the end of this decade, we'll put a man on the moon. And what that does for me, that just, even though I say that now, it brings a tingle down the back of my neck. Think about what those two gentlemen had in mind. That's what purpose is to me. It's that guiding light which will drive people on, despite those two individuals not being there to see the end of their dream. That's the thing that makes it come alive for me. That's
so profound. And I think that goes right along with kind of what I was thinking when I asked that question, because when you think about it, if you become obsessed with the journey of discovering your purpose, you'll get lost.
Yes.
Don't become obsessed with the journey of finding it,
Yeah. That's a
because
really point.
it will be discovered if you do the thing, as Emerson would say, then you'll have the power.
Yeah.
Do the thing, then you have the power. And so it's this idea of, we are all driven by the most dominant image in our mind.
Yeah.
We're all driven by it. And so what dominates your thinking? Do the thing, and then you'll have the power. So move in the direction of
Yeah.
that image. What is that image? What is that aspiration? So when you have a Martin Luther King Jr. and you have a John F. Kennedy, there's a dominant image
Yeah.
that they set upon the consciousness of a nation,
Yeah.
to say, this is the picture.
Yeah.
Let me walk you through this. And with that image, it gives clarity,
Yeah.
it gives definition. One of my favorite definitions from an author over here, it says that vision is a clear mental picture of what could be, fueled by the conviction that it should be. And so if you don't have either one of those elements, if you don't have a clear mental picture of what could be, when you're dreaming of what, if it's not clear, if it's murky,
Yeah.
then you're going to have challenge with that vision. But it also, there has to be this triggering element, that fuel by passion, that this is not just what could be. We could make $1 million a year, we could make $1 billion a year. None of that means anything. We should do what, so the clear picture connected to passion, that's what, in my opinion, drives vision. It drives purpose.
Yeah, I love that. And I love that difference between the could be and should be, because I think there's a lot to be said for that, because that's the thing that drives it on. And I think the bit you mentioned just there, which really resonates for me, is around, do you find your purpose, or does your purpose find you? Because I believe we're all born with a purpose, and that may seem very spiritual in that sense, but I believe it's only when you find it or discover it that you can start bringing it to life. And I bet if you looked at some of the leaders you've worked with over the time, they probably don't know what it is, but you probably saw that spark in their eyes when they talked about something. You saw the thing that brought the tear to their eye when they said, this is what we're here for. And I don't know how that makes you feel when you see that, because to me, that's the thing that brings the hairs on the back of my neck go up, and I think, this is it. This is it.
One of the reasons that I got into coaching, primarily because I was frustrated by watching those sparks fly in the training room and not being able to facilitate the evolution of that spark, knowing that when they left that training room that day, maybe it's a 1 day, 2 day, 3 day training, there's not going to be anyone to help guide them through a process to commit to the picture, that image, that spark that they saw in that room.
Yeah.
And I got into coaching because I said, you know what, I don't want to just train. I know that I can facilitate a conversation that ignites something within people, that spark takes off. But if it just stays a spark, I think it's Napoleon Hill that says it quickly goes out, right?
Yeah.
And I think it was Zig Ziglar who said that a dream that is or a goal that is casually made is quickly abandoned at the first sight of trouble. And
Wow.
so how do we facilitate a process? And so when you look at your why for coaching and creating that spark, what do you see as that driver that kind of channels that for you?
That's a great question. I was going to ask you the same question, so I'm glad. Do you know, for me, I spent a lot of time, I'm going to use the word struggling with it, thinking I had to find my why. I worked for a business back in 2010 onwards, and we used the word intent. And we said, actually, if you understand your intent, you'll be get clear about it. And for me, I spent a lot of time with a great coach, and she helped me come up with one word. And it wasn't the right word, but it got me on the journey. And the word she helped me come up with was to help. And we just used one word and said, okay, because if I understood one word, it becomes clear. It's in my mind. So I played with this word to help for a long time. And as a coach, as you probably well know, we're very good at helping people. But the problem is, as a coach, if we get stuck into the Cartman drama triangle, we can go from rescuer and stick in that journey there of just wanting to rescue everybody we meet because everyone needs help. And I realized actually it was too passive. It wasn't the right thing. So I had to move myself into another paradigm. And we can talk about this in a minute, but to me, there was another paradigm outside of that persecutor, rescuer drama triangle and say, okay, what's the other side? And that word help didn't work for me. So a few years later, I've been running all my life, but I started running marathons to raise money back in 2008. And I realized the thing that I got from my marathon running was not just raising money, but I became inspired to do more. And I noticed other people were inspired to do it as well. So I started playing with this word rather to help, but to inspire. And I realized what I'm really good at in a non-egotistical way is actually to inspire people. I do stuff where I want people to be inspired to take action, to not just listen to the training, but be inspired to get up and do something, to pick up the book off the shelf, to get down the gym and do something, to get out and put their trainers on and run. And that's the thing. So for the last probably 8 years now, I've been working with this word to inspire. And I say to myself, contextually, does everything I do sum up to helping inspire the person I'm talking to in some level? And if it doesn't, what do I need to do to change my mental attitude to help them become inspired or inspire themselves? So my purpose now is simply to inspire.
See, and this is where I hope all of our listening audience really grab that, because most people believe that they can't move because they don't feel like they have the right word or the right element, and it's like that's what we're kind of getting at with the purpose. If you become obsessed trying to reduce every other possibility to get to your right word, you'll never get started. But to help got them started on the journey. And it's so funny because I was in discussion with a client earlier this week about the drama triangle, and it was I challenged him because I said it's is it I asked him the question, is it possible that you take too much responsibility? And
Yeah.
and he said, no, I don't think that's possible. You can't be too accountable. You can't take too much responsibility. And so one of my favorite books is the 50 Commitments of Conscious Leadership. And in that book, they lay out what it means to be above and below the line. And as everybody knows, who's heard me talk about the above and below line, above the line is you take ownership, accountability, and responsibility. Below that line, you have blame, excuses, and denial. And so below the line is this place, and the drama triangle really puts us in a position where we're either victim, where we're just hopeless, we're just helpless, so nothing I can do about it. Everything happens to me, or villain, which it's always my fault. You know, you meet people. I've met quite a few people that, oh yeah, everything's my fault. They just. And the other one is the rescuer, the hero, where they don't allow other people. And so in this drama triangle, on 100% responsibility, the commitment, the above the line commitment is that I commit to taking 100% responsibility for my personal, emotional, and spiritual state. And I support others in taking 100% responsibility for their personal, emotional, and spiritual state. And when you jump in and try to rescue and don't support people in taking 100% responsibility, you are also living below that line. And I found that to be fascinating. And so as coaches, we get the opportunity, you know, essentially, people actually give us money to hold them accountable to the image and the dream that they have. And if we try to jump in there and be the rescuer, and this is where I find your transition from helper to inspirer very, very critical, because if you jump in and help your clients, you actually do them a disservice because you diminish their ability to take full responsibility for their own vision and for their own dream.
Yes. And that's, you know, that's exactly it. And it took me a few years to recognize that. And I realized that because I was sitting in the helper mode, I was actually sitting in the rescuer mode, taking responsibility for you, where I can't take responsibility for anything. I can just inspire you to take things for yourself and do things for yourself. And I love that way you've articulated it. There's one bit that I think really sits in there. I love this thing about the above and below the line. And I talked about different paradigms. And this paradigm idea, I think, fits really neatly when you talk about the 50 commitments, because for me, I used to talk about new and old paradigm. An old paradigm is victim, rescuer, persecutor. New paradigm was actually just this word, responsibility. How do I sit in a place where I can take responsibility of everything that happens to me around me, and realizing that only I can control what's going on. It's not the government, it's not the weather, it's not COVID, it's me. And only when I step into that place, I can stop blaming people for my mistakes, because it's only me. If I'm injured, it's actually me that's caused it. And I think as a coach, you and I sit in that same space where we're here to sit in a space of non-judgment about the people we work with. We're here to help them realize for themselves that what they want to do. And I think you've got to move from this left-hand side, as I call it, the old paradigm, victim, rescuer, persecutor, into this space of responsibility. And the word that sits in there is just love. And if you can get to a point where just actually love, which seems very spiritual sometimes, but as a coach, I sit there in space and say, how do I help this person love himself or love themselves better and do more for the world around them? And I think that comes full circle back to this thing about sparking people, getting people to spark and understand what's really going on for them at heart, at source, as a human being. That's the key.
Yeah. Now, one concern that I have is that up until now, our listeners are going to think that as coaches, we're having all the fun. So, which is fine. We do have fun in what we do, but this podcast that we have is designed to actually activate within others the ability to have the same fun that we have. So when you look at helping leaders shape the culture of their organization, to activate the elements of genius within others, where do you start in kind of navigating leaders to really become active participants in releasing the genius within their
that's a great
teams?
question. Great question. So I've just started re-listening to a book on Audible, which I haven't seen for many years, and it's by Marshall Goldsmith, and it's called "What Got You Here Won't Get You There."
Yes.
And I haven't read it for many years, and I'm just listening to it, and there's a key bit in that actually, as an engineer, I was great technically at doing what I did. And I used to laugh with people. As an engineer, I was paid for the answers I gave. Because at the end of the day, Rolls-Royce was about keeping planes in the sky. And if I got it wrong, planes fell out of the sky. Not good. Whereas as a coach, what do? We ask questions. So the key is actually we have to help leaders ask questions and sit in a non-judgmental space of the people with them and leave their ego at the door. Now, that's an easy thing to say, a tough thing to do sometimes. And Marshall Goldsmith talks about this quite a lot in terms of actually, we have to just sit there as people, because you could become a CFO in a business, or you can be a CEO in a business because you're good at doing what you do, but you've got to be a great people person. And that's about just sitting there and saying, okay, how do I help the people around me help themselves, and we grow the business together? So I think to answer your question, actually, it's about they've got to recognize themselves, they've got to park their ego, and they've got to start working on themselves first before they work on the business. That's the key to me. What's that?
Rich.
Yeah, from your perspective, I mean, you're in this game as well. In that case, one thing I know of you, you're very good at standing up and speaking, and you're working with audiences. So how do you get that message across to an audience when you're working with them, which is full of leaders who have got big egos because they've done what they've done really well?
Well, and I think that part of that in communication is one of the elements that we position ourselves to do. And I can I think is Patricia Fripp from that side of the pond as well. So, all right,
I've not heard of her name for a long time. Patricia Fripp, yes, she does a lot of work with Alan Weiss. Yes.
Yes. So I've been through a lot of communication coaching and learning how to communicate. And I believe she's one of the best in the world at it when I've heard her teach and kind of prepare people to kind of do that. And it's teaching as a communication style and a communication device to ask questions that force other people to give the answers. So it's almost doing the same thing that we do on the one-to-one basis. And I think the best speakers don't sound like they're speaking to thousands. I think the largest crowd I ever spoke to was about 17,000 people. It's just, and it felt good in that moment. But if you're really, really good, the difference between the reason I only spoke to that group one time and the person that came behind me speaks to a crowd that size every week is because he's learned the art of not talking to 17,000 people, but he's learned the art of talking to one.
Wow. Yeah.
And having that skill to really speak to every person in the audience as if they, and that takes skill, and it takes an understanding of shaping your language all around that one person that you're trying to make a difference for in that audience.
That's
really being that.
Yeah. And I think that comes across in terms of just the coaching work that you and I both do in terms of the individual. You have to make it unique to the one person. I think there's a lot of consultants in the market around the world, and they have their package. They have their toolkit of what they've developed over the years. And then they try and apply that same toolkit to every person in the same way. And actually, as a coach, we need to unfold our toolkit and bring out the right tool and say, Stephen, what is it we need to work on today to help you become the best person you can be? I've got the tools, but we need to apply it to you personally. And I think that's
this is what's difficult for me. And for those that are in our listening audience, you have to understand, this is why terrible coaches stay in business. Terrible coaches are really good at just applying the same tool to every situation. And the sad thing is that that's what sells.
Yeah.
And I hate to say this, but that's what sells. People want to buy a proven system, something that they can logically wrap their heads around there. They want to be able to buy a system when their challenges and their problems are nothing but unique. Yeah. But they want to buy and apply the tool. And if you can fit into a package. And so terrible coaches oftentimes, and I say that because they're great marketers, because they're able to deliver from a marketing perspective. And so I feel like I had to learn the balance. And this is a little confession time for me. From marketing uniformity, and then when I get the client, customizing delivery.
Yeah, I love that. I love that.
And so it's just, and so I'm training a group of coaches right now. We have a cohort. We every 6 months we run some. We have a place where we try to where we help people not only develop the art and skill of coaching, but also to build their coaching practice. And so in that. We have to, I'm finding myself always teaching this. You have to market to uniformity as if there's only one solution in the world that's going to work for everybody. And then once you get them to sign the dotted line, then you have to begin to customize your delivery. Yeah. Because everybody, as much as they want to buy that, everybody's not going to be helped or served really well by buying the same tool. It's almost as if going to a store and believing everyone's going to fit into the same pair of pants.
And I think that's a great analogy, and I love that in terms of that pants analogy, because at the end of the day, we all want something different, and what works for one doesn't work for the other. But the key, I think, is that we can actually stereotype people into some way when we look at the leaders in businesses. And actually, they all have that same. They all have a group of issues which are similar. And our job as coaches and leadership developers is actually helping them understand, actually, what is it I need to do to apply that to myself, and also then look at myself in the mirror. Because I think the great thing that coaches do, and the great thing that great coaches do, is hold up the mirror to the individual and say, what do you see? And that's the key, because actually you've got the marketing uniformity, but we can then apply it in a different way, because we can say, okay, who's looking back at you? And I think that's the key. I've got a funny story on this. Over this lockdown in the UK, which we've now had almost 12 months of, we've been going through many movies on Netflix and Amazon, and we've discovered Rocky again. Now, I haven't watched Rocky for 20 plus years, and bear in mind the first Rocky was written in 1976, I think it was. And one of the key things that I picked up in that film this time round, 30 years later, was who's the person you're fighting? And Sylvester Stallone points in the air, and he's training the young guy called Creed. It's Creed's son. And he makes him look in the mirror and say, who's the guy you're fighting? He says, it's not the opponent. You're fighting yourself. That's right. And actually, we have to help ourselves get over what's in here, what's in our mind, because that's the thing that's going to stop us. And that's the thing that's going to help us get where we want to go. And I come back to that. I think there's a wonderful message in that film Creed and in all the the Rocky films, which is actually about you've got to deal with yourself first. And that's the uniqueness of coaching. It helps you understand yourself.
That's brilliant. And so when we're looking at leaders as we're kind of, wrapping up our conversation, and hopefully this won't be the last time, because I'm really thoroughly enjoying it. But I realize that we design our podcast to be able to fit within the ride to work or the ride back home. So we have to have boundaries somewhere, right? So when you're looking at organizations that are looking to inspire and to lift the entire culture, not just maybe an individual leader with an individual team, but you're looking for as a culture, they realize that they've been in error in the sense that they've been a business that haven't been intentional about creating that spark within their culture. What advice would you give them, and what would be a good starting point?
Yeah, that's a great question. We're packed with a lot of information, so we're going to have to spend a lot of time on the next call talking about that. But I think the starting point for me is first of all realizing, in the same way you talked about purpose and purpose finding you, and actually it's the thing that becomes consistent in your business. I think a lot of people go out of their way to try and say, okay, what's the culture we're given? Now, my view is you go out and create the culture. And I think this is one of the things that there's some great businesses out there who say, okay, how do I want to be perceived? In the same way, great marketing companies will help you position your business in the mind of the consumer the way you want to be perceived. Actually, you can do the same with culture. What culture do we want? Let's be intentional about it. Because actually, at the end of the day, the employees want to come to work for a business that fits in with their values and their own purpose. They may not have exact alignment, but I think too many businesses sit in the boardroom and say, right, this is the culture we're going to dictate to the business, and everyone else just fits in. Whereas my view is actually we need to start working in the bottom up as well as top down to say, okay, what are the key values? What's happening in this business? What's going on for us? And not just the values, but really understanding what are the behaviors we expect. Because it's only the behaviors when you can see the culture coming to life. So my view is understand what culture you want. Do you want a work all hours God sends and you'll get the culture from that? Or do you want to work where there's balance? Do you want to respect people? Do you want to provide a culture where people feel they're respected for what they're doing? And you know what? We can go out of our way to create that. And it all becomes a matter of choice. So my big thing is just choose. What culture do you want? And then let's work on creating it through everything we do. And I believe it is possible. So that word choice really comes home for me.
That's rich. That's really rich. Well, I want to thank you for taking the time to spend with us. And like I said, I'm excited to be able to run this conversation again and again, because this is something that I can talk about all day. We're all driven by passion, but some people are just they're passionate about the football team, or they're passionate about someone else's dream, right? Someone else's championship, someone else's, and to really become students of ourselves, and to become passionate about what ignites us. That ignium that sparks us to that next level. That's going to be able to make the difference. So Phil Rose, thank you so much for spending time with us. We're so excited, and we want to have you back again sometime soon.
Oh, thank you. I really appreciate it. It's great to talk, and it's nice to talk with an expert in this field and have a conversation one-to-one. So thank you very much for having me here. It's been great. Thank you.
Thank you.